Former President Donald Trump reportedly feared that Ghislaine Maxwell could drag him into Jeffrey Epstein's sex abuse scandal, according to journalist Michael Wolff's new book, Landslide, The Final Days of the Trump Presidency. Trump asked, quote, "Has she said anything about me? Is she going to talk? Will she roll on anybody?" He allegedly also discussed giving himself a pardon, telling aides, "They say I can, unlimited pardon power."
Here to discuss is Democratic strategist and Senior Vice President of Firehouse Strategies, Michael Starr-Hopkins, and Patrice Onwuka, Director of the Center for Economic Opportunity at the Independent Women's Forum. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
Patrice, I'll start with you. I think it's very, very, very fair to take everything reported by Michael Wolff with a massive grain of salt. I think we have learned that lesson very clearly over the years. But in this case, how do you think this should? Do you think that this sounds like something that Donald Trump would have actually discussed? I do think the part where he's talking about pardon power, that sounds like something Trump would say. The Ghislaine Maxwell thing is interesting because Trump is already dragged into the Ghislaine Maxwell thing by his own doing. He was. We know that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were hanging out at Mar-a-Lago a lot. In the 90s, we know that Trump very intentionally disassociated himself with Jeffrey Epstein, unlike a lot of other very powerful people who did not intentionally distance themselves from Jeffrey Epstein, and in fact, like Bill Gates, actually purposefully aligned themselves with Epstein after he got out of prison. But do you think this sounds like a plausible point from, or a plausible bit of reporting from Donald Trump?
No, I question it. I mean, perhaps he said, yeah, did she say anything about me? We don't know what context that is. If she could have said something about him being at his Mar-a-Lago resort and, certainly tried to make connections. So I do take it, as just a salacious headline to get his book pre-orders sold. And I question whether we're going to see a very direct link between her and him in any sort of complicity for anything illegal. Now, I am looking forward to some of her financial records being released within the next week or so, where we do expect to see some of those other big name, high profile individuals. You didn't mention Emily, but I'll just fill in a name, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, and whether or not there was a direct link between her and them, and in terms of financial money being sent to her through their foundation. So I'm looking forward to that. But this is just a way for Wolff to sell his book, and he knows that we're talking about it, and a lot of other people are too.
Well, we do know, just as a matter of fact, that there is a direct connection between Maxwell and Trump. That's not something that is even up for debate. And it wasn't just, did she say anything? The quote there is she going to roll on anybody? I am quite prepared to believe that is precisely the reaction that Trump would have. And when he's saying anybody, he's not just talking about himself there, but he's talking about his social circle that he knows was also intimately involved with both Epstein and Maxwell. What do you think, Michael?
Look, if you've got nothing to worry about, then you've got nothing to worry about. Clearly, Trump has something to worry about, because not only in this instance, but when he did that interview with Jonathan Swan at Axios, he continued to lavish praise over her and wish her well. He then did it again in a press conference. Look, I mean, I don't know what Trump was doing in the 90s and early 2000s, but he's clearly nervous about something. And if he had nothing to hide, he would have nothing to be nervous about. So this sounds exactly like what's in line with what Trump was doing and the people he hung out with, and why he would be nervous.
Yeah, Michael, let's put one other fact into the public record here, into this conversation. Get your reaction to it, Patrice. When Epstein was profiled in a magazine in the 90s, Trump was quoted as saying, "I know I'm a cool guy. From what I hear, he loves really young women." Mm-hmm. I mean, he said like that. He said that. And what about Michael's point that this person who's been made out to be kind of a national villain, Ghislaine Maxwell, is then being defended slobberingly by the president publicly? How do you account for those two different things? His expressed knowledge of Epstein's interest in young women, and his affection for Maxwell, his public affection for Maxwell.
Well, to your first point or question, did he define young women as someone under the age of 18 or 16 years old? I don't know. It Well, wait, but there's a difference there. Number two, there are plenty of people, and as we all know, who get accused of things, and because they choose not to say anything, or they are assumed to be guilty by association. Is that the case here? We don't know, but I would hate to jump to a conclusion to say, oh, well, obviously he's acting guilty, so he must be guilty. I think there are plenty of people who would continue to maintain their innocence and are and have seemed or acted in a way that other people, observers, would say, oh, obviously they're guilty. So, until you have some hard facts other than what he said that could be taken and construed in lots of different ways, then I think it's pretty difficult to jump to a conclusion here.
So I'd just add, I'm skeptical that Donald Trump is personally implicated in anything other than that he has a lot of associates who might be very directly. I mean, Alan Dershowitz, who denies all of the allegations against him, is just one example. What was happening at Mar-a-Lago is another example. Virginia Giuffre alleges that she was picked up by Ghislaine Maxwell at Mar-a-Lago, which is not good for, obviously, it's optically a very bad thing. And I'll just say, Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, there's a credible theory that Maxwell was working for intelligence, and that Epstein and Maxwell perhaps could have been working for intelligence agencies. I think that's another thing to add into all of this. Maxwell has been charged with trafficking underage girls between 1994 and 2004. She has pleaded not guilty on all counts. So that's where we stand on all of this. She's currently in custody awaiting trial. Her lawyers are now citing Bill Cosby's victory, claiming her case presents a similar situation. There have been some interesting legal opinions written since the Bill Cosby decision was rendered last week, saying that when we litigate these cases, these extremely high-profile cases, and there's a lot of public pressure, things turn out differently than they would in normal cases. Do you think, Patrice, that's the case do you think that Ghislaine Maxwell is making a legitimate argument there, or do you think she's jumping on to what happened in the Cosby case, essentially as a desperate effort to protect herself?
Look, her lawyers are doing the best that they can do, which is to try every and any legal argument they can make to get her out of jail. And I think that's what we're seeing here. From what I understand, she's claiming that a deal made between her, Jeffrey Epstein, somehow applies to her. And I think that is probably going to be found to be unfounded. Is it a good, maybe I'll give it a B for effort, but it's going to get an F for failing, because I don't think you can make that argument that, well, he got a deal and it covers me. That's not necessarily going to be the case.
Michael, do you think that the federal prison system is going to take better care this time with this witness to this global conspiracy than they did with the last one?
I think they better. After what happened to Epstein, there's zero trust in the system, zero faith. And as someone who used to be a public defender in Manhattan and has had experience in those very jails, it's sketchy to say the best. And so I think the protective coverage that she's going to get in Brooklyn, I think, is going to be a lot better. And hopefully she makes it to trial. I think it's in everybody's interest that she makes it to trial and we see a conviction.
Well, not everybody's necessarily.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's very true.
That is true.
Michael, could you speak just a bit more to what sort of the disparity between the legal treatment that Ghislaine Maxwell is probably enjoying and people who are victims of sex abuse that don't have the privilege that she does to be able to buy the legal team that she has?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you have money and you have access to funds, you are able to get high-priced attorneys that are able to get you better treatment, able to prolong the trial, able to get you more access to discovery. And honestly, judges are just nicer to private attorneys, especially the high-profile ones. So, having money may not solve every problem, but it always makes it a little easier. And so especially in, the federal system, she's going to be isolated by herself. She's going to have access to her attorneys more often than most people under a trial would. It's jail, so it's never nice, but she's definitely going to get better treatment.
Yeah, that's an important point to keep in mind with all of this. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And next on Rising, Brianna Joy Gray is here. Stay with us.